Good morning, Robin.
Morning.
My name is Doug Fairbairn. I'm interviewing Robin Matlock, mainly about her career at VMware, but we're going to touch on her early life before her professional career, as well as some of the other companies that she worked with along the way, and some of the things that she's been involved with since leaving VMware. So, Robin, welcome. Happy to have
Thank
you
you.
here.
Nice to be here, Douglas.
So, in our oral histories, we like to start from the beginning. You know, where were you born? When were you born? What year? Tell me a little bit about your family life, especially in the context of what might have steered you or not in the direction that you eventually took in your career.
Okay. I don't think my early years would be any kind of predictor of where I ended up in the end. I was born July 9th, 1965, in Mesa, Arizona, which is in the greater Phoenix area. Very middle class, probably even lower middle class family, to be honest. Two older brothers. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old. I was the youngest of three. So I really don't have a recollection of my parents ever being married, frankly. And as dysfunctional as that sounds, it wasn't. My parents were good friends. They were very respectful of each other. And I grew up in what I would consider to be a very loving, functional, happy home. Low middle class. There was no luxury, but a happy home.
Tell me about your mother.
My mother's just the love of my life. She is 82. She is got a master's in counseling. My parents got married and pregnant very young, like she was a freshman in college. Oh. So kind of derailed their life plans, but they did what you did back then. You got married, but they both finished their degrees. They both got graduate level degrees. She is kind of a quiet force, but just she traveled the world. She took us kids on an exchange. She got a Fulbright scholarship. And when I was 7 years old, so we were 7, 10, and 12, the age of us three kids, she's single, and she got a Fulbright scholarship to teach abroad in Wales, Great Britain. Wow. And then that family came and lived in our home, drove our car, taught in her classroom, and we went to Wales. So I lived in Wales my second grade in elementary school. Still have dear family friends from there. We've all stayed in touch. But so she was an adventurer, although she was, also somewhat traditional too.
What did she teach?
She taught elementary school. She went on to get her master's in counseling later, but at that time she was a typical career for a woman back in the 60s and early 70s as
and
teacher.
So tell me about, you were in Wales when you were very young, so you came back, you went to school in Mesa, continued on through there.
I had a very thick accent when I came back.
I was about to say, how was, were they speaking English or Welsh in the Welsh school? And the English was probably not understandable.
We spoke English. I came back with a very thick accent. They were losing the Welsh traditions at that time, but there was a big movement afterwards to preserve the Welsh language. And so it was, some of our dear friends were very native Welsh speakers and are involved very much in the Welsh preservation to this day. But I did come back with my thick accent. My father could barely understand me. I was like, what happened to my little girl? But actually, that year in Wales, I think, gave me a bit of an advantage because their educational system, at least I felt when I came back, I was a little ahead of my peers. I had learned multiplication tables. I just had learned some things a little bit more in advance, and school came very easy for me, and it felt like that might have been a turning point. So anyway, I excelled at school, and all of us transitioned right back into life in Arizona and carried on, and Wales was a great memory and a great part of my history.
So then you went into high school. What activities were you involved in high school?
Well, I was involved into about everything, to be perfectly honest. I was definitely the Renaissance kind of gal, and I did sports, I did music, I did student government, I did academics, so I kind of drama, I really dabbled in it all. Music did carry through everything, and that will continue. I'll probably touch on that in my narrative, but I started violin in Wales, and in 5th grade, they started a harp program in my community, which is kind of unheard of. And I was in the first crop of kids that was invited to play harp. They went to the existing kids, played music. And so in the public school system, I got lessons, and they bought little harps for our schools. And then as we went to middle school, they bought harps for those middle schools. And as we went on to high school, they supplied those high schools with harpists with one harp per school. Oh. So I played harp, and that was kind of maybe a little bit different, and it does link to some of my future endeavors.
Did you ever take your harp home for practice?
Oh, had to. That was like, you got rotations. Every student, had to sign them out, and and it was a heck of a thing to haul. By my sophomore year in high school, my grandparents helped me buy my own harp, and so I bought a harp, as a sophomore. So then I didn't have to haul it. Then I had to haul my harp because we were on an ensemble. I was in the paper one time hauling my harp in my long dress and big, huge case like the size of a coffin. And you have this dolly, and it was quite the picture in the newspaper.
And what sports were you involved in?
Softball, tennis, badminton. I was the worst basketball player, but I did play basketball one year, and I was terrible at track, but I did track a little bit. So,
wow, you really did cover it all.
Yeah, softball and tennis were probably my strongest suits.
So did this develop a competitive spirit in you, or what?
I have
just fun?
Well, it was that too, but I have a naturally competitive spirit. Not competitive, crazy competitive. Like, I think I can accept losing. I don't like losing. I try to learn from losing, but I like winning a hell of a lot better. And I'm willing to do things I'm willing to put in work. I think if anything, I probably have a pretty strong work ethic, and that when you have a really good work ethic, things like sports or music, it just kind of helps you stand out because you're willing to do the work.
So music then actually led you into college, is that right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, it was very common in my community that you went to the local community college or you went to ASU. Maybe if you were really bold and adventurous, you went to Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff or U of A in Tucson. Very few of my peers went out of state, at least that I knew of. Like I certainly, my social group didn't. But a friend of mine was very academic and kind of just kept needling me to say, Robin, why don't you set the bar higher? And by the way, my parents love them. They were awesome, very hands-off. Just kind of assumed I would just go to ASU and we'd be done.
So despite their multiple degrees and so forth, they were not pushing you on the education side?
No, I think it was always assumed. I know. It was always assumed I'd go to college, but it was also assumed I'd just go local. Like I had ASU in my backyard, literally 5 miles away. When I started talking about going out of state, we didn't have that kind of money. And everybody was a little bit like, where's this coming from? And what's your game plan, girl? Because mom and daddy aren't going to fund this. So I started thinking that maybe music could be an avenue to get some scholarship money. I knew academically that I was good, but everybody's good. There's just so much competition. So anyway, I kind of nailed down, I literally got those books, those big encyclopedias, and looked up schools, but I developed criteria. I kind of knew what I wanted. I wanted small. I was leaning towards private. I needed a music program because that's what I thought I'd get some money from. And in the end, I picked 6 schools. I applied to them. I got into 4, got rejected from 2, and chose the one that was the best academic that gave me some financial support. So I did get a music scholarship, and Rice University was the one that came out on top. And by the way, I never had visited any of the colleges. I hadn't even been to all of the states that they were in, and I wasn't going to get to go. So it was a brochure kind of decision.
Right, none of this traveling around during your
junior
year,
no,
right?
No. So, but I couldn't have made a better choice, to be perfectly candid. There were a few bumps along the way and some little fine print I didn't realize about my harp scholarship. But all in all, I always was very proud and thrilled to have attended Rice University.
So did you play harp throughout 4 years of college?
I did. There was a little detail that I missed on the scholarship letter, which said I had to get a degree in music. And I'm not quite sure to this day how I missed that, but somehow I didn't understand that concept. So I show up to Rice, and I literally am registering for my classes and going to present my list of classes. You know, the old day it was pretty manual.
Yeah.
And they're looking confused, like, well, where are your music classes? And I literally was like, what music classes?
Yeah, right. Why would I do that?
I have no desire to have a career in music. And that's when I had the rude awakening that, I would be getting a degree in music. Hell or high water, there would be a degree in music in my future if I wanted to stay at Rice University. It was quite an ordeal, actually. The music school, I did sign up for the music classes, and I immediately decided I was going to get, a complimentary degree. They didn't have a business school, so I got economics, and they had some kind of general studies. I can't remember what it was called, like independent business studies, or I can't remember. Some people did that by themselves. I didn't think it was meaty enough to be a degree, so I did economics and this general businessy degree and music. So I kind of have like 3 disciplines. Well, the dean of music calls me into his office. They're ticked. They are not happy. And it was my harp teacher and the dean and me, and no parents, no advocate for myself. I'm 18 years old, and they really grilled me and said it's inappropriate, and you're here on a music scholarship, and we expected a music student. And I remember really feeling defensive and scared, and that they'd take my money away, that my whole college path would change. And I stood my ground, though, and said, I am going to get these other degrees. I will meet the requirements of my scholarship. And I stood up and I burst into tears, and I said, I'll see you in 4 years, and stormed out the door crying. I was actually quite shaken. But I did see them in 4 years, and I did have my degree in music, and I also had a degree that would set me up at least for my future. And
Well, that was quite a position you took. That was
I did.
Dramatic and forceful.
I was scared, and yet I believed that I needed to do that for myself. And yes,
So
held
it sounds
my
like you
ground.
had some notion that maybe some sort of business. You weren't planning to be a teacher or something. You know, you were somehow you were going into business. Is that?
That's right. I had no idea. To be perfectly candid, I had no idea. But I wasn't a STEM kid. And actually, I maybe could have been a STEM kid. I just don't think I got pushed enough in that direction. I was great in math, but dropped out of math after about my sophomore year. So that was obviously not going to be my path. And I didn't see myself in education, no. So I figured business was close. There'd be something in that area. No idea that tech was in my future. No idea.
That was not on this list of courses that you were signed up for, huh?
I took computer science as part of my general, kind of generalish business degree, but I did not think I would land in. I had no idea where I would land, frankly. I was just trying to get through. Right. I mean, my smallest semester, I think, was 19 units. And one semester I took 24 units. 3 of them were pass-fail, so 21 real classes and a pass-fail. So, it was a rough. Yeah, it was not always peaches and cream.
And then you had as part of that, all the music stuff. And did you struggle in the music area? Was that something you were comfortable with, even though you didn't have
it just
a
was
passion?
time. It was a lot of time. You have to. In getting a degree in music, I didn't get a performance degree, so I didn't have to do the recitals. I got the smallest requirement degree I could get, which was a Bachelor of Arts in Music. But, if you're doing music history and your test is to put on headphones and listen to 20 seconds of a symphony and identify the movement, the composer, the history, you got to listen to a lot of symphonies a lot of times to be able to recall that. So there was a lot of time. But, I did okay in college.
So you got through 4 years. Were there any teachers, professors that took you under their wing, helped you, steered you, or you just sort of plow your way through?
Well, Rice was always pretty good it was a small school. I had relationships with most of my professors. I think, friends that I built at Rice was probably the lasting things for me. Mm-hmm. I took a year abroad, so in that 4 years, I also studied abroad for a year.
Where was that?
I went to Vienna for one semester,
Yeah,
and
good
then
music city.
Freiburg, Germany for a second semester. Yeah, so I only had 1 year of German before I left. But I found a program that you could start in English, but as you got better and better, you could transfer to Freiburg, and it was a submersive program where I took 2 classes at the University of Freiburg and then 3 classes at the American Institute in German, but supported by an English speaker. So in 2 years, I came out pretty fluent. That was a long time ago, and I'm no longer as fluent as I was, but it was a good ride.
Interesting. So you graduated, then what? Did you have any idea what the next step was, or you just focused on getting your degree? And
I really didn't know what the next step was. I interviewed at Arthur Andersen during the end of my senior year. And I remember, I was kind of excited by it, but I was right next to finals. I didn't have enough time. I didn't prepare at all. I literally did not read a single brochure. I show up for a full day of interviews in my one interview suit. And the opening question of the first partner that I met was, well, let's start with what you know about Arthur Andersen to begin with. To which I knew nothing. I mean, I literally knew nothing. I stumbled through that first interview, but of course I learned enough in that first interview to proceed the rest of the day. Well, the feedback comes back and they said they are very confused. The first partner was adamant no. Everybody else you met was really excited about you, but that first partner was really unshakable. I'm like, well, no shit, Sherlock, because I had done no homework. So I didn't end up.
this is another example of you going into something you had no idea about and figuring it out on the fly.
Yes, but that was really a symptom of just being overextended at school and can't really handle an interview process at the same time. But maybe in some ways I kind of dodged a bullet. I didn't join Arthur Andersen. So I moved back home, had no idea what I was going to do, started thinking about sales or orchestral management. Maybe there was music and business together. And then my uncle passed away right after I graduated. And I went to his funeral and met some other family. And it literally is just luck of the draw. My family was my dad's cousin lived in Piedmont, California. They asked me where I was looking. I said, boy, San Francisco sounds great. They said, well, come check it out if you want. And I literally packed my bags in a week. I had no job. I had very little money, but what I did is I lived with them. And I didn't have to go wait tables. I could just take my time. They were willing to feed me some food and let me live rent-free. And then I could start an earnest job search. And naturally, that then led me into Silicon Valley, which is the dominant employer in the Bay Area. And so I can't give myself any credit for really foresight and vision. I got here through really good graces and generosity. Once I got here, Silicon Valley was the place to be, and then I made it happen from there. But I counsel a lot of kids now. I mentor a lot of young people nowadays, and I talk to them about the power of industry. And the tech industry is I was so fortunate to land in the tech industry. And it is the greatest gift that has been part of my career. And I counsel others, look for industries that are growing and booming and innovation. And because everything you will do in your career has to be built on a foundation of, an industry that's healthy and thriving.
So what were those first jobs? Tell me a little bit about stepping out into the world.
Yeah, it was sales, which is a lot of when you're kind of businessy, you don't know what you want to do. You have somewhat of an outgoing personality. Oh, you'll be great in sales. Go into sales. So I started in sales.
Where? What company? What were you selling?
Well, I first started out of tech in ADP. Payroll
Automatic
services.
data processing.
Yeah, automatic data processing, payroll services. Lasted about a year, didn't really value what I was selling. I was selling to CPAs, and I felt like what we saved them in a year, they charged in an hour. I just didn't like the value proposition, and it kind of made me fearful. I had anxiety over selling to them, embarrassed, and
Were you cold calling? Did you?
Oh yeah, you had to cold call. You had to literally barge into their office unannounced, and I just didn't. It made me creepy. So I didn't survive. I didn't do well. I landed at Altos Computers.
Oh, I remember Altos.
Yeah, Altos, and I was kind of in this hybrid inside sales, but kind of marketing too role. It was like, I don't know, I can't even remember. I think it was a software division of Altos, a little pocket division. And then I started to thrive and was feeling really great, doing well. My boss really liked me, thought I was, conquering the world, and that was going great. And then they were belt tightening. And I remember my boss called me into his office and he said, I just want you to know you're going to be fine. You're going to be just fine. And the next day I came in and got a pink slip. Wasn't fine. My boss didn't know if I was going to be fine. He wasn't high enough up to be able to give me any promises. It was, it was my first introduction to, hey, at the end of the day, you kind of are a number, and the company has to do what it's got to do to run the business, and don't think you're irreplaceable. Don't think you're so valuable. They owe you for nothing except the last day you work. And with that mentality, I didn't look at that as a bad thing. I looked at that as an important lesson, that when I would live within my means, I would always have a cushion, and that I would only give to any company what I was happy giving. I didn't give it because I expected something in the future. I expected something. I only expected to be paid for the day I work. And with that, I had very little to lose, but I also had a pretty high threshold for what I was willing to give.
So you were learning the way of the world in terms of how businesses operated. And in the process, you developed some sales skills. You understood what the whole sales process was about in the world of sales, how that was measured and what they cared about.
I learned to think like a customer. I learned to advocate for customers. I learned what I think is really important in sales is not convincing people that they need something they don't need, but finding the people that need something that you have to offer. And your energy is better spent to find those that have what you need, as opposed to trying to, schmooze somebody into something they don't really need. So really getting into needs analysis and really what are the deep problems that someone is dealing with, and how do you really add value and solve for that. And I think those are kind of important in general business in general. And I still feel like I'm a good advocate for customers and sales too, because sales is a tough grind of a job. Every quarter, you have this great high. It lasts 24 hours, and then you're back to the grindstone again. And yeah, I did carry that. I was in sales for probably the first 7 or 8 years of my career. After Altos, that layoff, I went back to sales, pure sales. Mm-hmm. And I did that for, another handful of years.
For other technology companies?
Yeah, I went from Altos to, we're going back here, I think Opus Systems. Mm-hmm. Opus was in Spark Unix PC add-in cards. This was kind of when workstations were really expensive. Sun Microsystems was just going crazy, but they invented a PC add-in card that you could slot into a PC, but you could run native Unix on the card. And it was you could build a cheaper workstation, and then they could run both DOS and Unix simultaneously in the same piece of hardware.
So by this time you were really ramping up your technical knowledge in terms of you were dealing with different operating systems and hardware and software. And
from Altos, I was in the tech industry. Mm-hmm. From that really second job, I stepped into tech. So Altos, Opus, and then I went to, was it ClickNet? Oh my gosh. Delrina. It was Delrina. The PC fax. Remember PC faxing?
Yeah, I do.
Before email, the automation of sending a fax from your computer was like, oh my gosh, that's innovation. So yeah, once after Altos, I was in the tech industry.
And always in sales?
First 7 or 8 years sales, And I was good in sales, but I wasn't great in sales. I think I didn't have a good sense of like, put your energy on this one customer is going to be the home run. I was like, they're all equal opportunity. They're all great customers. But I went sales, then to business development, which to me was an upgrade on the function because there was no quota. It was a little bit bigger deal making. I did a small divestiture. I would do licensing things. It was at Symantec, working for the business units. They needed to get some third-party software that they had to license. So licensing structures, big OEM deals, that kind of thing. And then from business development, I essentially got tagged as, I think, a leader, an athlete. And then I got invited to run product management and product marketing for one of the business units at Symantec. And that was really my first foray into anything marketing related.
Yeah, so let's talk about, that's a big transition. And was that a direction that you had in mind, or did that just opportunity came and you decided to take it?
No, I kind of feel like in tech companies, there's two big pivots. There's the engineering product side and there's the customer side. And I think it's nice to be closer to the gravitational pull of one of those. And I was leaving sales and kind of getting further away from the customer. And I thought product management kind of gave me an interesting way to get closer to the product side. So yeah, I was very interested in kind of segueing into kind of more the product side of things. And when the opportunity presented itself, I definitely jumped at it. I mean, I wasn't out there banging doors to get it, but I had moved out of sales into business development in the business unit. So now I was part of the product team. I was just on the business development side of it. Right. So that made the product management side look really interesting.
And was that, I mean, do you have one product? Do you have lots of products? How big of a job was that at the time?
Yeah, so I worked for the Remote Productivity Solutions business unit at Symantec. It was about 40% of the company's revenue. Norton was the big gorilla at Symantec in those days. But it was 40%, and I ran product management, product marketing for the entire portfolio. So essentially 40% of the company's revenue. It was a big enough job for someone who didn't know a damn thing about product management. It was a pretty big job. Global. I had product marketers around the world. I had product management next to engineering. I'd never written a product requirements document myself. But they knew that. They knew that. I think in some ways I got to give hats off to, it was Chris Calisi was my boss at the time, and Gordon Eubanks was the CEO in those days. Yeah, but what I think Symantec did is they did, if you were a smart, bright, hardworking person, they'd tag you as talent. They weren't afraid to stick you on something you didn't know, just because move your talent around. Really what happened is Chris, my boss, wanted to use his head of product management, who was a rock star, on some skunkworks project. And he wanted to pull him out of that. And he felt like his team was fairly established, so it was okay to put a leader there that wasn't, I wasn't building something from scratch. I was taking over something, which was fine. That was a great training ground for me, freed up Michael Kerman for him, and, I think it's a good thing. Hats off to companies that are willing to move their talent around and give them different experiences. It opened up a whole new trajectory for my career.
Yeah, it seems like that's a big jump. Was
That was a
then
big
you
jump.
sort of taught yourself along the way? Did you have any mentors or other people, in parallel or whatever that could help you, or were you sort of, okay, go figure this out?
I don't think you do anything alone. At least I don't. To say there was a single mentor, no, I don't reflect on that either. I remember lots of times getting help from people who worked for me. Like I didn't come in there thinking I'm an expert, so you have to treat your people with respect. Maybe I was good at leadership, but I wasn't a good product manager. So I feel like I really gleaned and tried to learn from those around me. And there was some tough feedback along the way. I just reflected recently, there was a pivotal point of feedback that I got in that job, which they did a 360 on me. And the feedback came and said, hey, Robin, in general, the perception is you manage up exceptionally well. Probably don't get very high if you don't manage up well. You manage down very well. Your people love you. You are an advocate for your people. But your peer group, your peers, they think you're kind of tough. kind of a bully, kind of bitchy, not easy to work with, a right fighter. And, I really took that to heart and sat back and thought, why am I doing that? And I think, I was kind of tough elbows. I think to get there, and I was in a world, I wasn't technical. I was a woman. I am getting thrown into jobs I have no experience in. So yeah, I was probably overcompensating a bit on the tough girl act. And it checked me at a really key time. And I listened to that feedback and I started thinking like, I got to build relationships. And it changed my whole approach to how I worked in cross-functional environments. I think it was very important feedback. I needed it. And I think it was very effective. That was at Symantec, yeah. Yeah. I think it served me very well, and I did adapt.
Had you managed a substantial group before that? I mean, was this the first people
I had
management?
always managed. No, I had managed since my second job. I've always had people management. Yeah. I was the class president when I was in 6th grade. Like, I think leadership has been kind of innate in my DNA. But yeah, I had people management jobs from like my second or third job.
Okay. So how did that all end? Symantec, and then
yeah. So
how long did you spend there? I mean, did you get really established in that job and feel, okay, I understand this product marketing job?
Yeah, I was in the job for, I don't remember exactly, a couple years. Had some great opportunities, got to go to China in 1999, before China was the China we know today. So, I mean, yeah, I was in there. I don't remember exactly. I have to go look at my resume, but enough. Mm-hmm. What happened is Gordon left. We brought in John Thompson, who was just amazing. And as John started to look at the organization, he started restructuring things. He was collapsing businesses. So my business unit and the Norton, they were going to merge. And the reality is I was not going to get the head VP of product management job. I was going to get put back into business development. Mm-hmm. So I just decided that was kind of a step back. I had liked the direction I was going, and so started returning calls and went back and worked for a former boss, the old Delrina boss, was a CEO now of a new company, and I joined him as I had all of marketing. It was a small company, all of marketing, all of sales in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Later, I ended up with just marketing, but all of sales and marketing in the very early days of that company. It was like a Y2K company, and we transformed it. We kind of reinvented it a couple of times, but I left in 2000 from Symantec. So I think I'd been at Symantec 5 years, and Delrina before that, like 3 years. They got acquired by Symantec. So altogether, that was like 8 years, kind of in one swoop.
Pretty big chunk.
Yeah, and then I went to ClickNet, a Y2K company. We went through Y2K and reinvented ourselves. We bought a company in Israel and redefined ourselves as a security company. Repositioned, everything.
The security part came from the
Israel.
company in Israel.
Yep. We bought something called Core KT, and we ended up repositioning as host-based intrusion prevention. We're running out of cash. Sold to McAfee, my arch rival, and of course, I went along with the deal. So I landed at McAfee.
So now you
later.
were into the security business. You had not had any experience in the security area before, right?
No, I was at Symantec, but I wasn't even in the security part of Symantec, but I was at Symantec, which was very security oriented, but I wasn't in that particular business, but you're kind of in and around it. But ClickNet, which then later became Intercept, was my first 100% security play. But I'd been kind of in and around. By the time then McAfee, then Imperva, I had been in security now.
So you understood that industry and the players and what the hierarchy was and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So at that point, you were pretty comfortable. You understood the industries. You were comfortable in product marketing. You'd had sales experience. You were well embedded in this part of the tech industry. Yeah,
I would say, I mean, I don't know that I'm ever comfortable, but I certainly was starting to get to my kind of main swim lane. Mm-hmm. After Symantec, I had product marketing in my remit until VMware. And at Intercept, that jump from Symantec, product marketing, product management, to all of marketing all the sales for a while. That was my first time I had the whole thing in marketing. And I held on to that. Then that obviously became ultimately the swim lane that I pursued. But I had comms and PR and AR and demand gen and digital. And, I had all those pieces, which were actually kind of new for me. That was in 2000. Got sold in 2003. Went back into product marketing, then got flipped into field marketing. I was kind of a couple years and then get retooled. At McAfee, I owned field marketing globally. Couple kids in there, which is not really great for careers, to be honest. Maternity leave is hard on careers. But anyway, I definitely then from there went to Imperva in security. And after Imperva, I wanted out of security. I kind of felt like if I didn't get out soon, I wouldn't be able to get out.
Why did you want out?
The security industry, first of all, on one hand, it's an amazing industry because it's like the gift that keeps giving. There's nothing that grows faster than like the amount of spend in security and the number of hackers that are trying to do bad things.
Yeah,
so
it's an exploding area, right?
Bottomless pit. So yes, that part of it is something to behold. It's a very technical industry. And so starting to feel the edges of my technical limitations. It's a paranoid industry because to succeed, you have to be extremely paranoid. So culturally, I was just kind of starting to feel like I didn't really love always the culture in the security industry. And again, I just wasn't convinced that I wanted to only be in security. And if I didn't only want to be in security, I had to kind of make that move. But it turned out to be an incredible segue,
So speaking of those, various companies, was there any of those companies, Symantec or others, that served to you as like, gee, this is a great model of a culture for a company, or a great model of what I don't want to be part of in the future? What did you learn about company culture in that process as opposed to just the product marketing part?
Well, I'm going to spare company names because a lot of those people are still in my network, and I don't think that is really because my opinion about something, doesn't mean that everybody's opinion. But for sure, there were a smaller company or two in there where the culture was not conducive for me and for me to be my best self. Mm-hmm. I feel like and this is true of everybody, when you're in an environment where people believe in you, you feel trusted, you feel like you can expand your wings, you can experiment, you can fail, and still feel like, you can succeed. For me, I'll thrive in that. If it's too throttled, if it's too controlled, if it's too, like every step has to be accounted for, then I start getting a little bit like constrained, and now I get a little timid. I'm afraid to try something because I'm afraid I'll be wrong. I'll make a mistake. When I start getting like that, now my best thinking isn't coming to the foreground. And yeah, I did experience that in at least one or two of those smaller companies where maybe it was a little bit more governed by the CEO. For me, I didn't blossom in that always. But I was pretty good about rebounding. I mean, when you're an executive in Silicon Valley, you've probably taken a few knocks. My career certainly has not been straight and up to the right. I've been laid off. I've been fired. I've struggled. I think that's less interesting because even if we don't talk about it openly, which, by the way, I think is a bit BS because it happens all the time to great people, mm-hmm. It's about what you do about that. It's about how you reflect on that. It's about either what you do differently or how you think about your next move or how you apply yourself. Do you crawl into your cave in your shell or do you, look out and go, that might not have worked for me for whatever reason. Me, them, you, what, money, market, whatever. That's gone. What's today? And I do think the Valley is a little bit, I'll give you a terrible statistic. I now sit on the boards of 6 companies, one's nonprofit, so 5 commercial companies. All of my whole portfolio has turned over their CMO, all of them at least once, if not twice. I've been on board since 2019, so in 4.5 years. There is a churn, we churn them quick. That's CMOs, that's not just CMOs, CIOs, other roles. So anyway, now we're kind of in a very different path of conversation, but I do think it's a little bit of Silicon Valley's DNA. It's part of what makes us competitive because we're willing to retool and rejigger, and a new trend comes, we need different talent, we need different skill sets, cut that arm off, grow this new one. But my career has not been completely, protected from that either.
Yeah, well, let's get to that other discussion later on, but I'm glad you brought it up. So you went through Symantec and some related things, and how did that then transition? What were the steps going to VMware then?
Oh, well, I was in between jobs. That was the big step. So I looked for jobs.
So the last one before VMware was
Imperva.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And we parted ways.
You wanted to get out of security, and that wasn't working. And
Yes. And we parted ways. And so I had an opportunity to not just kind of fall wherever, the pebble fell, but actually be strategic and think about what do I want. So I started an in-earnest job search and networking and thinking about different ways to look at the industry. And I actually didn't know about VMware. I was completely uneducated. Even VMware was always this kind of amazing unknown company. But through my job search and my network, and eventually, kind of got a lead there. Originally, the lead was for Vice President of Product Marketing in the End User Computing business unit.
In which?
End User Computing.
End User
EUC, End User Computing. And I went pretty far in that process, but didn't get the job, but they liked me. And so they said, well, we have this other job opening up in marketing, not in the business unit. Would you consider that? And I shifted gears and interviewed for that. So I must have done like 9 or 10 interviews for VMware, but landed the Vice President of Corporate Marketing for Rick Jackson, who worked for Todd Nielsen at the time, who worked for Paul Moritz at the time. And there is a funny story about this. Okay, so VMware was the largest company I'd ever worked for. This job was a Vice President of Corporate Marketing. Now, at the big companies, McAfee was probably the closest large company. I had been VP of Product Marketing and VP of Field Marketing, but not corporate marketing. Then I'd done the small company, Imperva, where I owned all of marketing, but it was a small company, a tiny budget. So now I land this job, Vice President of Corporate Marketing. Corporate marketing runs things like your big events, your brand, advertising, corporate positioning and messaging. Well, we ran VMworld. I had never attended a conference the size of VMworld. Literally never attended. I had been in the showroom, like of RSA Security, but I'd never actually paid for the ticket to go to the conference. So I'd never walked the halls, go into sessions, zero exposure. And now I'm running it. I had never run an advertising program. I didn't even know the lingo. And there was a few awkward moments when an employee of mine looked and like, you don't know what in situ means? In situation? Like, no. So, I got caught a few times in my naivete, but all in all.
Yeah, this seems like a pretty big step
it was
your
big.
part, on their part to.
They may not have uncovered that in the interview process. That's not my fault. That's not on me. I don't need to put that out on a silver platter for someone interviewing me that I have never attended a conference the size of the one you want me to run.
Well, but I mean, it's all these things. I mean, there's some sort of industry structural knowledge about all of these things. And so.
Yeah, but what I had done is I actually had product marketing, which is a nice, if you're going to be in corporate marketing, it's kind of nice to have someone who understands product marketing. Right. And you can assume they bring a little bit more technical depth than the average corporate marketing person. I also had done category creation because I'd been in small companies that were pioneering new categories. So I understood how to carve a place in a market. And maybe at a big company, when you're trying to reinvent yourself and expand into new areas, that might have been a little more appealing. And at the end of the day, I was a businesswoman. And I think that's probably what stands out, is that whatever function, I was a good business person who could apply and sit in any seat and start thinking like a business person and start running things and acting in accordance with what is appropriate for the business as a whole. And I think I did connect marketing to the business better than many.
Yeah, I suppose it's true that many in corporate marketing don't have nearly the product marketing or the technical sales and other kinds of things. More of a
They usually are career
come
marketers.
from a different perspective.
Maybe an agency, creative. They come up through kind of more the brand side typically.
Yeah, the organizational side and so
Yeah.
forth. So was that scary, fun? How did that all work out?
All of those things. Very scary, very fun. It was a great ride. So I did that for several years. I want to say maybe 4 years. And then Paul Moritz left. Pat Gelsinger came in. My boss, who I adored, had moved to Texas. Pat came in and was like, "Where's my CMO?" He's in Texas, and he had just moved. And his parents had just moved because Paul Moritz was fine with that. And then new CEO comes in, it's a whole new ball game. So that started crumbling. And this is actually kind of this is a good story for women. I knew that I was, officially tagged as the successor. I didn't give any credence to that. I thought that was just kind of an HR process. You check a box, and, I never really gave it much serious consideration. When Rick was moving on, he asked me, "Do you want to put your name in the hat for this job?"
For the CMO.
For the CMO role. And, it wasn't exactly Rick moving on. Rick didn't really want to move on, but he was in Texas. He wasn't moving back, and there was friction. And so, it was kind of not a perfect exit. So I was like, if they wanted me to be the CMO, they would just come ask me. They would just give it to me. And what's going to happen? This is how this is going to play out. I'm going to sit here trying to convince them I'm ready to be the CMO. They've already decided I'm not. They're going to hire my new boss, and it's going to be like, "Hi, Robin, sorry, you're not ready, and welcome to your new boss. And by the way, she wanted the job and didn't get it." And it's just going to force a dynamic. And ultimately, I figured if I play that card, I'm probably going to leave because it's going to be awkward. And so I said, no, I think I'll pass for all those reasons. He kind of agreed, and we left it at that. I had lunch shortly thereafter with a woman in HR, Ellen Snay. That lunch could not have been timed any more miraculously. She was all about talent development, very much an advocate for female talent. And she sat me down, asked the same question. I gave her my same answer. And she looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" I was a little taken back by that's kind of rude. And she was serious. She said, "That is ridiculous. And yes, you are right. Probably you won't get the job. They probably would have given it to you if they thought you were ready for the job. But why would you not use this as an opportunity to open up a different conversation? To let that leadership team get to know you a little differently. They know you only in this job you've been in. They don't know anything about your history. Why wouldn't you just create an opportunity to have a different dialogue? And by the way, you're a marketer. Control perceptions. Don't let it get awkward." And she was right. She was really right. So I called Carl Eschenbach, who you know, and I said, "Carl, can I change my mind? I'd like to throw my name in the hat." And he said, "Sure, Robin, you're welcome to." And so I did. And I prepared, and I thought a lot about what they needed and why they didn't come give it to me originally. And I think I kind of knew. I didn't have the scale of leadership. I wasn't from Microsoft or Oracle or Amazon, some big, huge company. They knew VMware was my largest employer.
How big was VMware at this time?
Well, I won't tell you exactly, but VMware was 2 billion when I started and about 5,000 employees, I think. And they were about 12, 13 billion when I left and 22, 24-ish thousand employees. So this is kind of, I'm going to guess we're
In between,
3 billion,
whatever,
3.5,
yeah.
something like that, maybe 7,000, 8,000 employees. So they were right. I didn't have that scale. They were right. I think they wanted someone more technical. So I couldn't fake that. But I felt like I had some other things. I was an insider. I had good relationships. I would come up to speed very fast. I knew where the warts were. I knew what relations. I knew a lot about getting things done. I had the discipline of marketing. I think there was enough proven record that I knew my function and was good at the function. And I don't know, I had one of that. I remember there were like 5 points. And I just went in very openly and said, here's my perception. You want these 5 things? I don't have these 2. This is what I do about it. I've got these 3 things. I think I'm exceptional here. We went back over my background. They didn't know about a lot of that product marketing, product management background, so I had an opportunity to resurface that. And I met with Carl, I met with Betsy Sutter, I met with Raghu Raghuram, and Pat Gelsinger. And I thought it went, it was great. It did what Ellen said. It opened up a different conversation. I felt it was a healthy dialogue. They got to know me differently. We're done. I never expected to get the job, frankly. I went back to my job, busy. I'm totally committed, doing my work. And I got feedback from Carl Eschenbach a couple weeks later. He said, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you showed up. And we got to know you a little bit, a little differently than we thought. And you made the short list. I was on the moon. I thought that was just that was success. That was just the best victory ever. And he said, the bad news is you're 3 of 3. I said, okay. All right. Well, I go back to doing my job. They go do what they're going to do. Time's ticking away. VMworld's getting closer. And
they were offering the job to these, the first 2 out of 3.
That's right. I made the short list, but I was not. They weren't going to go pursue a negotiation with me. Right. So the bottom line is I ended up as the CMO of that company. And the first person wanted to live in New York. So that wasn't going to happen. They just got, had passed on Rick in Texas. They started negotiating with the second person. And I still to this day don't know exactly what happened, but something didn't go right in that negotiation. They didn't like how it felt. And I think it was just a vibe. Mm-hmm. They didn't like it. Turned them off. So here they are. VMworld's fast approaching. They have 2 choices. They either start the search over again or they turn the reins over to me. And they gave it to me in an interim I can't remember, interim or acting.
Or whatever. Yeah.
It was, that's sad, I don't know. I think I was acting. Whatever it was mine to lose, essentially. Mm-hmm. They stopped the search. It was mine to lose. But I felt like they gave me a safety net that if it didn't work out, that they maybe could revert me back. And they didn't give me stock. They didn't do all those other things. They didn't give me a raise. Mm-hmm. And that was right before, I think that was in June of 2019 maybe, and they gave it to me not 2019, it would be 2013, mm-hmm. and they gave it to me in November of that year. And I was the CMO for 7 years, and I believe I am on history the longest reigning CMO that ever held that role in the company.
Okay, so before we delve more into that, I want to go back to the previous position. You were VP of Corporate Marketing. Uh-huh. As you came into that job, what did you find that needed fixing? What were the major changes that you instituted or feel proudest of, or however you want to characterize that? What was the?
I think everything was such a team effort. I never really feel like singularly proud of much in my career, but I tell you what
your team did.
The big challenge that VMware was dealing with in that era was we had really built the company on the backs of a single product, vSphere. And we were trying to broaden the portfolio. And in order to do that, the other thing about building the so much revenue on one product is our persona within our customers. We were everywhere in every major corporation, but we sold very low into companies. We sold with IT practitioners. And as our portfolio was scaling, and it was kind of doing some weird things, like, Paul bought some Slide Rocket and like crazy companies. But even over the next decade, as that portfolio was growing, who we sold to really needed to change. And our story needed to change in multiple times. And that was the work that was probably the most enriching, the most difficult, the most impactful. And I certainly did not single-handedly do anything. But we, as a marketing organization, corporate marketing, very deeply involved, had to help reposition the company, had to help prime the market for a different VMware. And, there were some messaging flops in that journey, but really had to get the market to see the company as something different than just vSphere. And there were several chapters of that. So there was vSphere and then broadening the portfolio. Then there was the whole industry moving to cloud and VMware perceived as an on-premise company. That is probably more in my CMO era. But helping the company be relevant in the cloud was probably one of the most lasting things of my 11 years at VMware, successfully doing that. And that was a lot of positioning and messaging. We built this VMware on a page slide that lasted for probably 7 years. Had the infrastructure software, had the application layer, and then had all the computing devices and security. And it was this kind of really visual way of positioning the whole of VMware. And it took iterations over the years, but that was really a one-page kind of, truth, of who VMware was, and did an exceptional job changing people's perception about us being this little, hypervisor company.
And how did you manage this task of moving up the sales chain, moving it to higher level executives? Was that...
Well,
did you have to change the sales organization?
Oh, everything, yeah. And remember, this is not Robin, this is VMware. Yeah. But we, some of those sellers didn't make it. Some of them were great at selling to a practitioner, but trying to have a conversation with a chief information officer is a whole different deal. It's a business conversation. You have to know their industry. If you're selling to the CIO of Fidelity or State Street, you better know financial services and well. So there were many, I think that was a multi-year journey, how to help them have different conversations, how to prepare them for that, how to, when that customer then poked around and who is VMware, there was substance and not just like technical briefs on the website to go tell them about what we do, how to get customers to tell our story differently. But there was a massive transformation in the sales organization that took multiple years. Global accounts, really carving those out to be very strategic partners with customers, how we staffed that, how we incented that, how we operated that on a global scale. VMware was brilliant at that, though, by the way. I think
So was Paul Moritz driving this, or was it subsequently Pat?
I feel like Pat was, Paul was only there like 3 years. Yeah. Pat was there 8. Yeah, this was largely Pat. And Carl was a part of that for probably a big chunk of that. Maurizio Carlo was the other one that took that pretty far. Sales, we were pretty deep in sales. We had good bench in sales.
So you mentioned the growth in the number of products and acquisitions. Was it mainly the product growth mainly through acquisitions, or was there a lot of internal, and was that driven top down, bottoms up? How did that?
Yeah, we did both, and they were different eras. In Paul Moritz's era, he did a lot of acquisitions. And I believe, I can't represent Paul's view, but I remember at the time he was very much experimenting. Like, we didn't have a SaaS app, he'd go buy a SaaS app. But part of the challenge was that SaaS app had nothing to do with what we did. So we kind of ended up with a bucket of bolts, a lot of stuff that wasn't really in a family or adjacencies. our go-to-markets were pockets of go-to-markets. It was just really kind of fragmented. So I think, I'm guessing that was part of, he decided maybe he's not the right person to take us into the next era. Pat came in, and Pat had a vision of business units. You put a family of products together, you put a GM at the head of this, you pair them in sales. They don't have their own sales organization. They might have an overlay organization or a specialist group, but they don't own the go-to-market, but they certainly feel accountability for the success of this portfolio. And that's, I think largely the structure that VMware had. Now, we took it a little bit too extreme, so there were BUs for everything, and you ended up with 7, 8 general managers, and that was very difficult for me because I'm in the middle of all of them, and
you had to market
all the
for
sellers.
everybody,
Yeah, and that we overdid it a bit. I think we needed 3, just bigger ones, so you could prioritize a little bit easier and make trade-offs. But that was kind of how we did it. And then with the sales organization, we built a core organization that owned the account, and then layers of specialist organizations to be experts in the various, really, NSX. Back to your question of organic versus inorganic. We did both. vSAN was probably one of the most successful organic businesses that we built from scratch, the first piece of code.
What was that, briefly summarize?
That was virtual storage.
Okay.
Yeah. Which was especially thorny because we were at the time owned by a storage company called EMC and then Dell. But we navigated that, a great ecosystem, built vSAN. But NSX was acquisition, Nicira. So there was really a mix. And I think it was getting harder and harder to do it all organically at the scale we were and the time to market, the time we needed to get into market.
So talk about the culture when you came in. Did that change over time? Is that a product of the CEO? Is it really embedded in the company? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually loved the culture at VMware. I had other people tell me that they felt it was a culture of debate. It never bothered me. I thought it was kind of healthy. For me, it respected intellect and horsepower. Like, you had to have good ideas. You had to be able to articulate your point of view, but it listened. Mm-hmm. And you could debate. You could arm wrestle. You could kind of even get mad at each other. But it still was always respectful. I have to say, sometimes at McAfee, there were yelling, just insults and really degrading comments from leadership that was, frankly, just inappropriate. VMware never had that culture. If there was a debate, it was a respectful debate. It might have been hardcore, it might have even gotten a little emotional, but there was never a sense of disrespecting one another. I think we try to do a little too much. Like, that stressed the teams out. And I think marketing was always a bit in the middle of the huge agenda from all the BUs and the incredible, need to focus from the sellers. But all in all, I felt the culture was respectful. I think Betsy Sutter had a tremendous amount of influence on that. Pat came in.
What was her role? What was Becky?
She was head of HR.
Okay.
Betsy was head of HR for like 22 years or something. Pat cared a lot about values, and I think put real substance behind our values. And that was fresh and meaningful, and it wasn't just a poster on a wall. Like, they really...
Yeah, he has strong core beliefs.
He does, and he brings that to the culture, and we celebrated values, and I think those survived, through really the test of time.
Okay, so we've talked about your position as VP of Corporate Marketing, and then you managed to get the job of CMO, Chief Marketing Officer for the company. What were the areas that they were unsure about or that they had concerns about that placed you number 3 on the list versus the lead candidate?
I think it was the 2 things I mentioned earlier. They wanted someone with more scale. Mm-hmm. So they would have liked someone from Microsoft or Oracle or Intel or Amazon or Google. So scale. And then I think the second thing was technical. VMware was a very technical company. And, it was hard. It took a lot of inner confidence to command respect. When you are surrounded by such brilliant technical people, it can be very difficult to be heard, to be relevant. And there were more than a few times when I did have to kind of remind my peers that just being technical doesn't mean, just because I'm not technical doesn't mean I'm not smart.
Right.
And sometimes the culture at VMware was, the engineers were the smart ones.
Yeah.
Everybody else was a little bit of a second-class citizen. And so I think they recognize that that's part of our culture, and maybe getting someone who had the technical chops would command more respect and influence. And I had to work around that. I basically had to give them confidence, and I think I did demonstrate this, that I had confidence I was smart. And I was not confused about the difference between my smarts and somebody else's smarts. I couldn't help you architect the product, fair. But that didn't mean I wasn't smart. So let's not pretend like I have no relevant opinions or thoughts. And I did understand the technology at a conceptual level. If you put some time and energy, anybody can. And so I could hold my ground, to be perfectly honest, on the areas that I needed to be an expert in.
Who did you report to going into that position?
Carl Eschenbach,
Carl, okay.
Yes, who's still a dear, dear colleague of mine in my network and has always been a big advocate and sponsor of mine, and I'm eternally grateful for his friendship, support, and mentorship.
Okay. So from your perspective, you mentioned sort of what their perception was. What did you feel were the biggest steps, biggest learning areas that you needed to step up to in taking this new position?
Well, I thought, first, it's a hard job, to be honest. Even after being, reasonably successful in it, I still look back on it as it's a hard job. And the hardest part was not the market. That's the irony. The hardest part wasn't actually delighting customers. The hardest part wasn't really getting positioned in the upper right quadrant of the Magic Quadrant. The hardest part was navigating the complexity internally. Marketers, CMOs have so many stakeholders. And in our world, where we had this plethora of business units who are each empowered to drive their business, they have to be successful. I'd sit in business review after business review, and Pat would just be like, "You're not meeting your targets. Why aren't you hitting those top line numbers?" He's holding them accountable. So guess what? They are going to do whatever they need to do to be successful. But we do need to prioritize. And if there's 8 business units, not all of them can be number 1, right? And that friction of constantly being in between all the investment we're doing in product, which sometimes has no connection to what we're investing in and go-to-market. Those are completely different sometimes, and I was in the middle of that. So the hardest part of my job was really making sure I'm making the right bets, I'm investing in the right places, I'm managing a very complex stakeholder contingency effectively, and that I am, the decisions and trade-offs I'm making are defensible and are right for the company, and that when all those escalations start, that I have made the right choices. That was the hardest part of the job, to be honest, not winning in the market, which is kind of crazy.
So you mentioned the interesting thing that the investment or focus in marketing, corporate marketing, might be different than what the investments on the development side.
Oh, yeah.
And that is
completely unconnected.
And so tell me more about that. What drove that, and what were the...
Well, what often would happen is we're going to go invest in a product. We're going to start tinkering, right? Engineering might have a business unit as a big budget, lots of people. They carve off 10 engineers to go do something. Well, that's actually a couple $1 million. Now they carved it out of something. Well, they go little by little, they start feeding it a little more. By the time they actually come to market, they might have invested $25, $30 million, who knows, right? I'm sitting in marketing. They want me to be more and more and more efficient, right? It's all about, if the company's growing 18%, I'm going to grow 6%. If the company's growing 6%, I'm shrinking by 1%. Like, right. I'm always getting pushed to be more efficient. Well, as your portfolio is getting more complex, marketing's not getting more efficient. It's not more efficient to tell the market about more things to more buyers and more segments and more regions. And so, I think that was just kind of it's one of those things where you just kind of squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And, I think in a lot of ways it just kind of hoped it'd work out. Mm-hmm. And, I guess in the end, eventually it does work out, but it wasn't without a lot of, I think a lot of internal cycles to do that. What marketing then starts doing is bigger buckets, right? Solutions marketing. We don't sell any point product, which the BUs hate. They want a cause and effect. Right. I have a target, I have a program, I have a response, I have a follow-up, and I have a deal. Well, we start casting bigger nets. We start positioning broader things. We're not exactly sure which product's going to get pulled into this conversation. We're opening up discussions about bigger topics. And that was very frustrating for the business units because you can't see a direct cause and effect, but it's the only way to survive when you've got way too many things to sell and a sales force who's only got so many cycles to engage with customers and you only have so many marketing dollars. So kind of a classic problem in complex businesses.
So maybe I asked this before, but when it came to buying, decisions to buy a company or decisions to invest in a new product, was corporate marketing involved in that? Was that driven bottoms up by engineering? We got a great idea, the CEO thinking, hey, this is a great way to extend. How?
Yeah, marketing. I mean, the executive staff and some of those would be involved, and marketing sat on exec staff, so you have a seat at that table. But in terms of the due diligence team, no, not really. Product marketing probably would be a little bit closer to that. But no, not really. Not really.
Was product marketing within the business units?
Yeah, product marketing was a dotted line to the corporate function, right. And I controlled some of their discretionary budget, like their program budget, but ultimately they were paired with product management and engineering in a GM kind of function. So a little bit of a hybrid, but their loyalty was to the GM side. Right. And probably more product management and corp dev would driving the deal team on the M&A side. We'd get involved in integration.
Mm-hmm. You had to put it all together. Paint a nice picture afterwards, right?
But not so much on the, It was the BUs that really drove the M&A strategies.
Right. So you mentioned, we talked about when you came into this position, I guess the corporate marketing, you had the VMworld
big corporate event
thing was part of your job then going into the CMO job, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So tell me about sort of, that was something new to you in terms of what you had to manage and control. And I also understand that evolved over time. Tell me about, and that was a major piece of the external perception of VMware, right?
Yes.
So tell me about how that changed to reflect the changes in.
Well, VMworld was an amazing program. Mm-hmm. It really grew into an annual, like a whole year long, not annual and like it happens once a year, but literally extends throughout the year. Right. It was, early it was face-to-face events were still common and interesting and compelling. Obviously, COVID hit, and that was, I kind of was exiting the business at that stage, but, VMworld had to make some really transformations then, too. But when I joined and I started, I would say it was about 14,000 people. It got up to probably about 25,000. I think it's, come down now through the COVID era. That's a lot of people, and then that doesn't count all the people you touch following on, because it would go do a roadshow through Asia. We'd do one here, we'd do in Europe, and then it would follow in all the major cities in Asia. So by the time you're done, you're literally touching 60, 70,000 people. So it was a huge thing. And if you wanted to shift perceptions, you definitely used that platform. Mm-hmm. So we used that to debut new messaging, to shift our brand, to educate the market. And the program had a lot of really fascinating pieces of it. It had the big marquee kind of stage time, which was broadcast and repeated over and over again, whether you came or not. But then it had a lot of technical, session material, which for those practitioners was golden. They got certified, they got credits, you really entrenched their passion for our technologies, and we taught them how to use it and all kinds of best practices, and there were labs and just endless amounts of opportunity to learn. So the challenge with it was you kind of had the growing influence of the business community, the technical business community, but a lot of those sessions were really technical for the practitioners. And so the program had to do both. And I think we navigated that very, very well, kind of up-leveling the keynotes, up-leveling the PR and that kind of stuff, but still not losing our core DNA in the technical side of the conference, and never turned it into a business conference, although the networking was amazing. And if you go to RSA, it's 90% about the networking. This, that was a growing part of it, big deals being made, announced, big partnerships, Amazon and VMware coming together, like really industry-shattering things happening there. But we never lost our technical kind of mojo.
So going back to this transition to CMO, you were interim acting whatever for a few months. Mm-hmm. What was, what made them decide that you were the one, or was there a big? Was conclusion of VMworld, or what was there some watershed event that says, okay, you've earned the job? Yeah,
you probably have to ask them that more than me, because I wasn't on the inside of that. I was just a recipient of that. I think at the end of the day, nothing fell apart. Mm-hmm. The ships ran on time. My peers rallied, supported the move. Not all, a couple of them left over the next year or so, but many stayed, in the boat with me. Mm-hmm. And we continued to blossom and contribute. And, I think they saw me now. I had to sit in more leadership kind of discussions. I was in executive staff. They started seeing me at that level. Can I, am I shy and bashful, or, do I have a voice? Do I have a point of view? And I think I just earned my credibility in those couple of months, and they gained more confidence, not less. And they wanted me to have the job. At that point, they really wanted me to be successful. They just didn't want to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so I think they were rooting for me, to be honest. And it worked out. Good.
So what was the biggest challenge or challenges in this run? You spent 7 years as a CMO. 7 years as CMO?
Yeah.
Wow, a long time.
I was pretty much the CMO under Pat. Yeah. He was a little before me and a little after me, but I was pretty much his CMO.
You were the one.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest changes during that period that from your perspective, from your organization's perspective?
Yeah, I think the company went through many massive changes. So of course, CEO transitions are always disruptive. That's a huge thing, and Pat brought a very different strategy. We've talked about that. Paul was very experimental, acquired a lot of companies. They didn't really all fit together. Pat was acquisitive, but he really believed in adjacencies, how you build out your portfolio in these business units, and you build families of portfolios and, real kind of strong adjacencies. But macro level, what's going on in the world is the world was moving to cloud. And here we were entrenched in on-premises. We were the kings and queens of it, right? We were truly data centers, like the very thing that is on-premises. Mm-hmm. So this huge threat is coming. So we had a lot of threats. From a marketing standpoint, I had a huge messaging and positioning issue. People did not perceive we were relevant in the cloud era. Okay, so that was a job, and I think we did a masterful job of helping to bridge what we were doing and why that was relevant in a cloud era. But in the big picture, Pat was maneuvering to build a portfolio and to build partnerships that guaranteed this wasn't just wordsmithing. And that was probably the relationship with Amazon. The Amazon VMware partnership was the disruptor, and it unleashed an incredible amount of buying power, because even our most loyal customers were not sure what was this investment they were putting in VMware going to do long term as eventually they moved to the cloud. And they loved us, but they weren't sure of what that answer was. And we had vCloud Air, and we had pieces and parts, but it wasn't until we actually forged the relationship with Amazon, we really built the whole cross-cloud kind of narrative and delivered solutions that gave them the insurance policy that said, I can live happily on-prem, I have a pathway now, I know that every investment I make here is going to be with, I'm not going to throw that away and have to redo that. And that was really breaking glass. And once we did that, customers kind of relaxed, the spend went back up, and they did what they wanted to do. They wanted to live on-prem for quite a lot longer, but they needed to make sure they had the insurance policy of where their future was headed.
Did many of them, in fact, want a bridge, have some of both?
They still do. They still have tons of both. They weren't going to be able to walk away from all their processes, all their systems, all their legacy applications, but they just needed to make sure they weren't kind of digging themselves a grave by partnering with VMware. And that partnership was such a game changer. Like, the industry did not expect that. At the time, the narrative in the industry was Amazon was eating VMware's lunch. All those workloads were leaking to Amazon, and this was a rivalry among rivals, and it was just basically two big sumo wrestlers going at each other. It was very unexpected to partner. And so, to your marketing question, I had a lot of work to do to make sure that people perceive that as positive. They understood it. They took away the right perceptions, because it could still be, we were going to die if I didn't handle that effectively. But building cross-cloud messaging, how we had a multi-cloud strategy, we then shored up the Microsoft relationship.
Yeah, I was about to say, what about Google and Microsoft?
Those followed, but the initial one was Amazon. And there was so much trepidation, it was so risky, building that partnership, it was kind of one step at a time. It was like a first date, and then you see, is it okay? And then you go on a second date, and then you hold hands, and really carefully making sure we can trust each other. And I do think both parties did an excellent job of that, and marketing is right there, right? Even though it's your engineering, well, we got to get in rooms and talk about our customers. We got to reveal some customer data. We have to start, are we going to jointly campaign together? Are we going to, show up as equal partners? Or are you the king and I'm the subservient? Like, a lot of nuance and all that. But we collectively navigated it, I think, very well. And we did shake up the industry with it. And marketing gets, credit like many, many others in that, process.
Let me shift gears for a moment. What about you were owned by EMC during the whole time that you were there? Is that right? Up till the Dell acquisition?
No.
Or
well, I was there past the Dell acquisition, so
okay.
That was a whole nother. So EMC owned us. I don't know, you probably know better than I. When Dell bought VMware, is that in 2015 maybe? I think 2015. I became the CMO in 2013, and I think Dell bought them in 2015.
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
It probably finalized in 2016.
Yeah.
I feel like it got announced, and we were in Barcelona, and it happened literally while we were there at VMworld.
But you were owned by EMC when you came in.
When I came in,
Right.
VMware had been owned by EMC for quite a long time.
Yeah, and during that time, then it went public before you came in also.
Yeah, it was already public by the time I came in.
So let's just talk about that for a moment. EMC, Did you interact with EMC? Was this a major challenge? Was it?
It was horrible. It was horrible all the time. And it was horrible. They're great people at EMC and great people at VMware, but it was very, very difficult because EMC owned 80% of VMware,
Right.
yet we were wildly successful in our independence. And we partnered with all of their competitors, all of them. And it was just wrought with friction, right? They were just, it was trying to do business reviews and trying to collaborate and us trying to play Switzerland and them being furious for us for playing Switzerland when they were our parent company, but you couldn't argue the results. And, it was just, and marketing was often right in the middle. I still have scars over that era. And without throwing anybody under the bus, what I feel like often happened is we had conflicting strategies. We literally were competitive on many levels, storage in particular.
Right.
And they couldn't come to agreement. Our storage was going to do this, our partner was going to do this. They couldn't get that where we weren't competitive, and they'd turn to me and say, Matlock, fix it in messaging. And they never say fix it. They would just say, we can message this. We can get this in messaging. How do you fix it in messaging when you're fundamentally competing? Like, I can wordsmith all over the place, but I cannot change your products from being competitive.
Right.
And it was often very, very challenging, to be honest. We got through it the best we could, but it was not pretty. It actually got better with Dell.
Really?
Yeah, it did.
So, Dell went out to buy EMC, and you came along for the ride.
Oh, I don't think it was quite like that.
Okay, so
I'm not Michael Dell. You'd have to ask him.
Just wanted to throw that out and see what the perception here is.
I doubt that was the logic. I think VMware was a high-flying, very successful, cash-generative, high-margin business that came along with EMC. So I don't think there was any confusion about what he was buying.
So that was a critical piece of what the acquisition was about.
It made all the numbers work. Mm-hmm. Without it, I don't think the numbers work.
What was the relative size of VMware versus the rest of EMC? I mean, just general. I mean, 2 to 1, 10 to 1, 1. I mean,
I don't remember, to be honest. They were much bigger, but it was hardware. Their
larger,
margins were small.
Yeah, the margins were much smaller.
When it came, in revenue, they were much bigger. When it actually came to contributing the operating margin and what actually went to the bottom line, we were disproportionately high.
Right.
But it wasn't relative to our size.
So, when Dell came knocking, Michael whatever came knocking, were you involved from the beginning? Were you aware? Did you be given the job of fix this or message this, or how did that affect your position?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there were a lot of conversations that happened long before I ever was involved, but clearly I got involved as soon as we had to these things had to be discussed. But no, I wasn't on the deal team initially. But yeah, I was involved from everything from that point forward, and actually worked very collaboratively with Dell, and it was just easier because Dell, first of all, Michael is just he's just an amazing businessman. He is very thoughtful, but he is not afraid to make a decision. And I think sometimes...
Now, Dell was another partner of yours, right? I mean,
Dell was
EMC was a partner, they were a partner,
Yep.
so they were...
Yeah. So they knew us, we had relationships, but I think it was this kind of competitive friction that made it so complex with EMC. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe in that kind of operating dynamic, we didn't have quite as much clarity on where our boundaries. Mm-hmm. We get into the Dell world, and although very open to business strategy and lots of strategic discussions, at the end of the day, you go round and around, you talk about option 1, option 2, option 3, but I guarantee you when you walk out that door, we're all going to know which option we're operating under, and it is not ambiguous. It is very clear. And that is something that was different in the Dell era. Whether you liked the decision or not, fine. But at least you knew what the decision was. And that took a lot of the inefficiencies out of operating internally because there was just more clarity. And we still fought for our Switzerland position and probably gave up some of it more than we liked. But at the end of the day, we wasted a lot less cycles kind of in the internal debate. So I actually found the Dell era refreshing.
So did it change the messaging externally in terms of how you spoke to customers?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there was now, Dell did the Dell Technologies, and then VMware kind of got positioned underneath that. If you remember, there was Dell Technologies and there was EMC, VMware. God, what were the other companies? I'm so sorry. I should have done more homework, got back and refreshed my memory. But anyway, Dell ran an initiative to go, we want to reposition Dell now because Dell is no longer this manufacturing. Dell is just one of the brands, but Dell Technologies is this big umbrella thing. So we were involved in all of that, and we had to go through hours and man-hours and man-hours and days and weeks and months, frankly, of their positioning, our positioning, cloud, how we would handle that, the ecosystem. And our core, for the most part, stayed, but we definitely had a lot to influence on how Dell Technologies positioned themselves and what was our position in that ecosystem, because we kind of had a chip on our shoulder, like, hey, we're bringing all the profit here. Right. But they had other investments. They were trying to position Dell Technologies as something more than just VMware. Yeah. So there was a great deal of work, and they had their own go-to-market. We were a partner of their, we were in that as a partner kind of role. We had ours. That stayed separate, but we just did a lot. Where we showed up together, there was a lot of prep and collaboration before that. Michael'd show up on stage. We'd go to their events, like you were doing a lot of cross-industry stuff.
So did you lose partnerships? Was there things that...
VMware was very masterful at protecting our ecosystem. And we did not lose partnerships under either era, the EMC era, the Dell era. We were very good about competing, cooperating, having a parent that was a competitor, and that had to do with, how do you treat these? How do you respect the boundaries? How do you create divisions between flow of information? What's your transparency? Like, what is your policy on transparency? Where are you transparent? Where are you not? And I think VMware was just really masterful about, when we're with HP, we're with HP. And Dell is not, they don't win there. We are going to market, our sellers are together. Like, we had to have a lot of integrity in our selling operation because you can't flip those hats, right? But we had done that for 20 years. And I think we had proven that we were exceptional. And it continued on. Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Look at our ecosystem. We always had partners that were competitors, but had successful partnerships with each of them.
So tell me, what are one or two things that are important in terms of your CMO job that we haven't talked about? What was either things that you accomplished or that your organization accomplished or challenges that you faced, overcame, any other anecdotes, major stories?
Yeah, I think the partnership with sales was always really important. And originally, field marketing did not report into the CMO, to my predecessor. And when I came in, I did make the case that you need to move field marketing into marketing. It was always a dotted line. They controlled budgets, but not the people. But the problem with that is it reported into sales, and the career path for those people doesn't go into sales. And then the budget trade-offs. I always was a big advocate of, like, he who runs things the trade-offs that they're making, you have to like the things that they are trading off. And for me, a CMO needs to make the trade-off between, am I going to spend it on brand or demand generation? Am I going to put it on the website or am I going to put it on an event? Like, those should be trade-offs that are made within each other. Not, am I going to put another inside salesperson or run a marketing program? Like, I thought that, I could do a better job of kind of managing that pie. But when field marketing comes out of the seller's organization, the partnership gets a little frazzled by nature. Anytime you move an org, they're like, oh, they're not my people anymore. Now all of a sudden the finger pointing starts. Now it's like, we don't have enough. They're not good. The leads are bad. So we had to do a lot to forge those partnerships and to maintain that and make sure we were really driving the agenda of the selling organization. And I think, we invested that. We stayed close to them. We really tried to make sure their strategy and our strategies were well aligned. We were investing in the areas that they cared about. And, I think we did a good job holding that together because it stayed the whole, I think it actually stayed that way long after I left. So that meant that shift stuck and worked and those relationships held. And I think it was effective and successful. So that was one. Solutions marketing would probably be another thing. When you have that explosion of business units and products, everybody's trying to throw their individual dart on the board, and the market gets really confused. And I think we did a very good job of, you start with storytelling and kind of narrative messaging and positioning into kind of solutions dialogue, but then you extend that into programs and campaigns and blitz days and enablement content and website presence, and you start to kind of carry that all the way through the market. We did it out of necessity because we were just inundated with too many products, but in the end I think we built DNA in the company to be a more solutions focused kind of company and marketing organization, and we started talking to customers much more effectively about bigger business problems, bigger solutions, and help products see themselves. You play a role here, but don't just go lobbing up your escalation because your one product is not the main message in this story.
So let's talk about how it all ended. How did you decide to leave, or what was the transition?
Yeah, that's a great story too, for me at least, a happy one. I had been at VMware, 7, 8, 9 years or so, and obviously thinking what's next for me. And had felt like I really hadn't positioned myself and didn't have the appetite and didn't really have the energy to go, I'm going to be a GM now, or I'm going to completely reinvent myself. I loved marketing. I loved what I did. But I also knew that I'm not sure I wanted to go do it somewhere else and start over again and reposition myself. So I stayed and at some point you're worrying, am I getting stale a little bit? So what is growth for me? So I started to think about board work. And I was pretty strategic about it. I did talk to Pat. I talked to Sanjay Poonen, Carl had left, and Sanjay Poonen was my boss, who serves on one of my boards to this day. And I thought I'd like to dabble in board work. Took me a little while to find a really good opportunity, but Pat opened a door for me, actually. They called him, and he wasn't interested. He had a lot on his plate, and he asked if they'd be interested in a different profile of a person. He introduced them to me, and I ended up following that process. It was Iron Mountain, Fortune 700, great company, and I took my first public board seat. So I tried that and liked it and kind of started feeling like, okay, this could be my next chapter, rather than go start another company and do it all over again. So I did that for about a year. COVID hit. I have teenagers in my last hurrah at home. I had a late junior, I think going to be a senior. And I just decided that the board thing felt like a good avenue for me. I could only do one as an operator. And so I started, preparing for my exit, and very amicably worked with Sanjay and Pat and, essentially prepared for retirement. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I retired in June of 2020, I started working on my board portfolio. And it took me, 6-9 months, and eventually built out my portfolio, and now sit on 6 boards. 2 of them are public companies, 3 are private companies, and 1 nonprofit. I advise some companies on the side, and I do a whole lot of mentoring. I kind of founded a mentoring program, and I'm doing that as extracurricular.
So tell me about how you picked the boards. What were they looking for in you? Was there a common thread for all of them? Was it a different need in each one? How was those?
Yeah, they're all different. First of all, I decided that, I was a CMO. I wasn't a CEO or a CFO, which the pecking order on boards is kind of CEO, CFO, then your technical guys, your CTO, your general managers of businesses, CIOs, then your go-to-market people, your CMOs, your CROs kind of thing. So I was only really relevant 10-15% of the time. I wasn't getting the top tier calls because of that, but I felt like I had a fair bit of cachet with VMware. It was a very credible tech company, and I thought outside of tech, that would carry even more weight. Inside of tech, I'm kind of a dime a dozen, to be honest, but outside of tech, we're special. We have something special in Silicon Valley. So I decided public company. I figured if I started with a private company, I'd always still have to justify that I was prepared for public company governance. But if my first one and my only one I could get at VMware was public, I'd never have to explain to a private company that I could handle a board. So I held out for public. Iron Mountain, totally outside the industry. At first, to be honest, I thought, okay, it's probably a tier 2 opportunity. How wrong I was. Outside of my industry, I thought, Iron Mountain, they're kind of, the old thing. They store records.
Store boxes of records,
they store
right?
boxes. I'm like in tech. I'm on the super cool end of this. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a great first opportunity. It's a great company, resilient, transformative. They do have digital dimensions, and they have inroads to customers that are, 40-year-old relationships that they can segue. They're growing, they're acquisitive, it's a great CEO, it's a great diverse board. I mean, just so many wonderful things to learn as a rookie.
Where's the company based?
Boston. Now it's kind of, to be honest, they've now embraced the COVID way and, are kind of more distributed, but it was Boston. So it was a great first board. I had a lovely experience, and still, obviously, I'm on that board, serve on 2 committees.
What did you feel you brought to that?
Well, to people outside of Silicon Valley, bringing leadership and expertise from Silicon Valley and how we do things. And what do? We are innovators. We are growth to our core. We are market makers. We are fast. We are transformation. We are all digital, right? And yeah, that's what I brought to it.
It wasn't your marketing, so to speak. It's your industry knowledge. Not industry in terms of individual industry, but how Silicon Valley works and sort of the technical industry, if you will.
I would say marketing was another, leg in the stool. Marketing and maybe go-to-market, broader than marketing, but just the market perspective, the voice of the customer, understanding go-to-market motions, partnership ecosystem. So yeah, that is one of the legs of the stool. No one's going to talk to me who doesn't want someone on their board that brings that to it. But I think the other big part of it was getting that DNA from Silicon Valley that could, and I'm although I'm from Arizona, I'm basically, my whole professional career is Silicon Valley. Sure. So that is in my genetic code at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get to your nonprofit and to your personal thing, but are there other unique boards or situations that where the situation is quite different, or what you bring is different, or?
They all have a little bit different. I fit for a little bit different reason.
Excuse me.
Yeah. The second one was Cohesity, which is more private and closer to the VMware world. Mm-hmm. So to that, definitely my understanding of the ecosystem, understanding of their business, the marketing, go-to-market. I was an independent. They had a lot of venture capital on the board. I had some relationships. Carl sat on that board. So kind of a known entity. They definitely needed to be, start thinking more diversely about how they put, independence on the board. So that one was probably close to the VMware expertise and leveraged my VMware history. The next one was People.ai. I was a target profile customer for them. So another tech company, but MarTech sales tech. I was the profile of their customer, so I understood the needs of their customer. So yes, marketing, but not, a little bit more from a customer lens. The third one was Dremio, and that was more, I just brought the industry experience, the leadership experience, relationships, the go-to-market side. So yeah, not really very different than VMware, their data lake, and kind of the whole world of warehouse and data lakes. And then the public one was MSCI. That was probably that I had the board experience coupled with the go-to-market and marketing and the Silicon Valley. That was probably back to that. So no one's going to talk to me again that doesn't want a go-to-market executive and that probably doesn't value my Silicon Valley DNA.
So you're on the board of a nonprofit hospital. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's called the George Mark Children's House. It is, I put as much work into George Mark Children's House as I do all the other ones combined. It's a work of love. It's a tough one. It's pediatric palliative care. So what that means is we deal with very, very, very sick children. Children who have life-limiting diagnosis and their families. And the idea behind this hospice stemmed from Dr. Kathy Hall, PhD in child psychology, who worked at Oakland's Children's Hospital for a decade. And she spent so much time counseling families who were dealing with a very, very sick child. Could be end of life, could be just during the journey of caring for their child. But hospitals are really sterile environments, and it's hard. It's a hard place to deal with this kind of dark chapter in life and care for your child that needs medical attention, but who wants to spend their last moments with their children in such a sterile setting. So she had a vision of, mirrored after some work that she'd seen in England, and she built a home. And it's a lovely home. It feels like home. But children can come there. They have all the medical, like all your medical things, instead of there being wires and everything hanging out, there's a beautiful board or painting, and it's all hidden behind, the Toy Story room or the cowboy room. And there's adjacent suites so whole families can come and stay. So if you're dealing with a child in the last stage of their life, you want to be with them and comfort them. So they have this adjacency that families can stay. So that was her vision, and she built this. It's not huge. It's not a hospital. It's 8 rooms. But we care for children and their families who are with life-limiting diagnoses. We do end-of-life care and then bereavement support and all the things to support families during that time. But we also do respite care because parents of these children are 24/7 caregivers and never get a break. And we have the medical facility that we can care for children with medical requirements. We have nurses on staff and doctors available. So the families could take a vacation with their other children, or they could just go visit some family, like simple things like a respite situation. So anyway, and all those services are provided free. Families don't pay a dime for this. So anyway, it's a beautiful, it actually, as hard as the subject is, I cry in every board meeting, but there's so much beauty, and our view of the world is that we celebrate life no matter how short it is, and try to give the most joy and dignity to these children and their families, and do that through compassionate care.
Yeah, remarkable organization. Is it all supported by donations? Is it?
It's mostly supported by donations. We do get some grants, and we get some insurance care for the respite part of it. The end of life doesn't get any reimbursement, but there is some funding for respite care a little bit. So it's a combination of all those things, but largely fundraising.
Sort of what drew you to this? How did you become involved?
Yeah, and I had known the founder, Dr. Kathy Hull, for decades, and I had known of the house and since its inception. In fact, Dr. Kathy Hull helped me when I first moved here. So she had helped me when I came here as a college grad.
Long time,
Yeah. So when I retired, and of course I'd accumulated a fair bit of business experience, although I know nothing about the healthcare industry. I have no experience in pediatric. I have not lost a child, so I haven't walked that path. I do know business, and every nonprofit also could use a business mind at the table now and then. So when I retired, Dr. Kathy Hull came knocking, and when she knocks on my door, I answer.
That's great. So tell me about your own personal counseling, mentoring service. How does that work?
So I founded a program. We're peanuts. We're small potatoes. But what we saw as a need and opportunity is young women enter the workforce sometimes ill-prepared. And we are really trying to help them navigate their careers. So what we did is we forged a couple of us together. We built some really interesting content that any professional could use, but we target young women at the end of their college career, like their junior, senior year in college, through their first stage of their professional life, like 3 to 5 years in the workforce. We built some simple learning modules, like best practices, things everybody needs to know, like, how do you write a resume and LinkedIn profile? How do you network? How do you interview? How do you negotiate? How do you, build relationships within organizations? Just how do you navigate your career? So kind of some basic learning modules. We give that to them in kind of classroom one-to-many settings. And then we tap into our vast networks of incredible professional women, and we partner them with a mentor that is tailored to their career path. If they're going into healthcare, we tap into all of our, doctors or nurse practitioners. If they're going into graphic design, we tap into my marketing network. If they're going into sales, we tap into our CRO. So we pair them with a mentor who is particularly experienced in their discipline, and they have one-on-one mentoring for 6 months. It's all free. It's all just because these women want to give back and they want to help these young ladies.
So these are colleagues of yours, people that you've done, and you sort of bring them together. And does it have a name?
It's called Spark, Growth for Women. But you won't find it on the internet because we're all word of mouth, and we just do it as a, kind of a local program. We put them through in classes, so about, 8 to 10 young women at a time. We're starting to do some work with Braven, which is an organization that is at San Jose State that is a class, but in Braven's doing similar things, but once the kids graduate, they're kind of off into the world, whereas we pick them up at that stage and foster that mentoring experience. So it's really important to me. I think mentoring these young people is necessary. I don't always feel they're prepared. COVID also tangled up their world quite a bit. And they're a little lost sometimes. We're trying to reach underserved communities. It's hard because that's not necessarily where our networks are, but the underserved communities need even more support. Obviously, young men need the support too. I'm a mother of 2 boys, so
I was about to say, is this strictly for women?
Hey, as a marketer, we have to focus. So we really, I do a lot of mentoring with young men on the side, but my Spark program is Growth for Women, and we are really trying to sponsor young women. I think the generation, some really get it, and they just seem to be like, wow, what a gift, and I'm all over it, and they take great advantage of it. I think some are a little lost and not quite sure yet how to leverage something so powerful as a mentor.
You have to get them at the right time.
You have to get them. You have to kind of teach them how to take advantage of a mentor, which I didn't really think we'd have to do. That part I didn't expect we'd have to teach them how to do that. But it is a bit of a learned skill too. How do you benefit from mentorship? Anyway, it's a little extracurricular in my spare time.
So you listed yourself as a fitness fanatic.
Yeah, don't look at my waistline. It doesn't always show on the scale.
Did you have a regular workout schedule?
Oh yeah. I work out all the time. I work out pretty much 7 days a week until someday happens. I just simply can't get it in. My go-tos, I still run. I'm 58 years old and I'm still running. You know, I'm not fast, but I still do. My normal route's about 5.5 miles. I do it probably 2 or 3 times a week.
Knees are holding up.
Knees are holding up, hips are holding up. Feet hurt a little bit, too many high heels, but still run. I have a Peloton, so I do the Peloton kind of on the off days. I love to hike with my husband. Got into tennis when I retired, so I'm a love.
Resurrected your high school.
Loving it. So I'm playing a
What
lot
about
of tennis.
pickleball?
Yeah, it's that's kind of a social thing, but no, I play tennis for my real passion. And then I'll hit the gym. Maybe once or twice a week I go to the gym, do the stair climber, weights, core stuff. So I'm pretty much every day got at least a good hour or two going on in something.
And you have 2 sons?
I do. I have 2 beautiful boys. They just had birthdays.
Are they off to college now?
One is in college. My oldest, Jensen, is 21. He is a junior, second semester junior at the University of Miami in Florida. Apple of my eye. He's studying chemistry with a minor in biology. No idea what he wants to do later. But
well, picking industries, that's the industry to pick. So.
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. He's hoping to go to Peru this summer to research ducks at high altitude. So he's doing just fine. He's great. And then my little one, my 6'4" little one, is a senior at Los Gatos High School. And he is on the varsity basketball team and is hoping to play basketball next year. He's a great student. So we're navigating all the college stuff now as we speak, trying to figure out what his future. He will play, it's just a question of where.
Well, quite a story.
Well, thank you.
Is there something that we should have?
No. I think we covered lots and lots of ground. I'm not sure anybody will ever really go and listen to it, but it is my story.
It's interesting. It's very interesting the way you've made your way, and a great model for women and anybody in terms of finding a way, taking advantage of opportunities and going after it.
Yeah, and I think also not always expecting that it's always going to be up and to the right.
Yep. Sometimes
it's hard. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you're just bad at something. It doesn't mean you're bad in general. It just means maybe that wasn't right. And I actually think that's probably more defining for me is how I dealt with my failures as opposed to how many successes I had.
Common lesson that we learn more from our failures than our successes.
It's very true. It's very, if you're open to it. You have to be open to it, though. You have to be open. You have to invite that in. Did you ever read Carol Dweck's book?
No.
The Growth Mindset. I don't know. It's not quite the right title. The Growth Mindset. Something about growth mindset. It's an amazing book. You should read it. But you're in the tech museum. You're full of growth mindset.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Robin. It's been a pleasure hearing your story and recording it for those who want to learn more about making their way in the world. And so we very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.